German Shepherd, was chained to a railway track. Baby's next move left everyone in tears. The sky over Willow Hollow draped itself in a cloak of shadow, heavy clouds swirling with the promise of a storm as thunder murmured its warning across the hills. Inside the sturdy walls of the Grayson family's cottage, a fragile warmth flickered, a sanctuary against the brewing tempest outside. 5-year-old Jamie Grayson pressed his tiny hands against the living room window, his breath fogging the glass as fat raindrops began their dance, splattering the panes with a rhythm both wild and tender. His toy trains lay scattered across the rug, forgotten relics of a quieter moment, as his hazel eyes sparkled with wonder at nature's unfolding drama. Ella Grayson glanced up from her worn novel, her heart softening at the sight of her son's wide-eyed awe. "Looks like a big one's coming, little star," she said, her voice a gentle melody woven with love. "How about some cocoa to keep us cozy while we wait it out?" From the kitchen, her husband Nathan called back, his tone rich with warmth. "Kettle's already humming, love. This storm's set to shake the hollow," says the weather app. The scent of brewing coffee mingled with the earthy tang of rain seeping through the window frames, wrapping the cottage in a bittersweet embrace. The wind howled louder, a restless spirit rattling the windows and tugging at the eaves, and Jamie flinched at a gust that roared like a beast unleashed. Lightning sliced the gloom, a fleeting brushstroke of brilliance, followed by thunder that trembled through the floorboards, shaking the very soul of the home. In that heartbeat of stillness after the crash, Jamie's face changed, his rosy cheeks paled, his eyes widened with a knowing beyond his years. He dropped the little train he'd clutched, its clatter a faint echo against the storm's fury. "Mama," he whispered, his voice a fragile thread. "Someone's crying." Ella set her book aside, her brow furrowing with a mother's instinct. "What's that, sweet boy?" she asked, leaning closer. Jamie pressed his ear to the glass, his small frame taut with urgency. "Someone's crying," he said again, louder now, his words trembling with conviction. "Out there. Can't you hear?" Nathan stepped in from the kitchen, 2 steaming mugs cradled in his calloused hands, his steady gaze meeting Ella's in a silent question. "No one's out there, Sprout," he said, his voice a rock of calm. "Everyone's tucked away from this storm." Jamie shook his head, his dark curls bouncing with defiance. "No, I hear him. He's sad. Really, really sad." Ella rose, her heart tugging as she knelt beside her son, smoothing his hair with a tender touch. "Oh, darling, it's just the wind playing tricks. Storms make the strangest songs." But then lightning flared again, and in the breath before thunder roared, they all heard it, a faint, aching whimper riding the gale, a sound so raw it pierced the cozy cocoon of their home. Nathan's spine stiffened, the mugs clinking softly as he set them down. "That's no wind," he murmured, his eyes narrowing as he joined them at the window. The cry came again, sharper now, a mournful plea woven into the rain's relentless patter. It was the voice of something alive, something hurting, a desperate thread of life fraying in the storm's grip. Ella's hand tightened on Jamie's shoulder, her breath catching. "It's an animal," she whispered, her voice trembling with the weight of realization. Jamie's eyes locked on a point beyond their rain-swept yard, his small face alight with purpose. "He's calling me," he said, his words ringing with a certainty that chilled Ella's bones. "He needs help." Nathan peered through the glass, the storm's chaos blurring the world beyond, but his jaw tightened as the sound drifted closer, louder, more broken. "That's coming from the old rail line," he said, his voice low and grave. A train horn wailed in the distance, its mournful cry tangling with the animal's sobs, a duet of despair that shook the night. Jamie bolted to the front door, his small fists pressing against the glass, leaving smudges of hope and fear. "We have to go!" he cried, his voice cracking with urgency as he strained to see through the deluge. "Jamie, love, Ella called, hurrying after him, her hands finding his trembling shoulders. She knelt, her heart racing as she tried to anchor him. "It's pouring out there and it's not safe." But Jamie turned to her, his hazel eyes blazing with a fire she'd never seen, a resolve too vast for his tender years. "I hear him, Mama," he pleaded, his voice breaking like the storm itself. "He's scared, really scared. He needs me." The cry pierced the air again, a jagged shard of sound that tore at Ella's soul, undeniable now, pulling them all toward its source. The rail line that snaked through the hollow, a mere 100 yards beyond their fence. Nathan joined them, his face etched with worry as the sound grew more frantic, a heartbeat of pain pulsing through the tempest. "That's no stray caught in the rain," he said, his voice steady but heavy. "Something's wrong, terribly wrong." Another train horn blared, closer now, its echo a cold fist around Ella's heart. "We have to help!" Jamie sobbed, his fists clenched, his small body vibrating with a courage that humbled them. "He's crying for me!" Ella's gaze met Nathan's, a silent storm of their own swirling between them. "Nathan, if something's near those tracks," she began, her words trailing into the unspoken dread they both felt. He nodded, already reaching for his raincoat, his decision made in the space of a breath. "I'll check it out," he said, his voice a vow. "Could be a creature in trouble." Jamie grabbed his father's hand, his eyes fierce with a love too big for his frame. "I'm coming too. He's calling me." "No, little man," Nathan started, kneeling to meet his son's gaze, but the look in Jamie's eyes stopped him cold. A knowing, a connection he couldn't fathom. The train horn sounded again, its rumble vibrating through the earth, a ticking clock they couldn't ignore. "Nathan, if something's trapped," Ella's voice faltered, her fear warring with her trust in her son's unshakable certainty. "Okay," Nathan relented, his heart pounding as he zipped Jamie into his blue raincoat. "You stay right with me." Ella grabbed the flashlight from the drawer. Ella darted to the kitchen, her hands trembling as she retrieved the light, its beam of fragile hope against the dark. "I'm coming too," she said, her tone fierce with a mother's love, brooking no argument. Thunder roared as Nathan flung open the door, the wind tearing at them, hurling rain like 1,000 tiny arrows. He scooped Jamie into his arms, the umbrella a flimsy shield against the sideways deluge. "Stay close," he shouted to Ella over the storm's wail, his voice a lifeline as they stepped into the chaos. The backyard gate creaked under the wind's assault, their boots sinking into mud as they pushed forward, the rain a cold lash against their faces. Jamie clung to Nathan's neck, his eyes piercing the dark, searching with a determination that broke Ella's heart and filled it all at once. "That way!" he cried, pointing toward a gap in the trees leading to the rail embankment, his voice a beacon in the storm. The cry came again, louder, a desperate song of survival that pulled them onward, a thread of fate binding them to the unknown. Nathan set Jamie down to steady Ella over a slick patch. But the moment his feet touched the earth, Jamie surged forward, a small warrior racing toward the sound that had pierced his soul. "Jamie!" Nathan shouted, lunging after him, but the boy moved with a purpose that defied the tempest, splashing through puddles, ducking under branches, his heart leading where his parents could only follow. "I'm coming!" he called into the night, his voice a promise to the unseen, a vow woven with love and courage. The rail line loomed ahead, its steel tracks glinting wet and treacherous as they broke through the trees. Nathan grabbed Jamie's collar just as he teetered on the embankment's edge, pulling him back with a father's fierce love. "Stop, Jamie. You can't go down there," he said, his voice firm but shaking. Ella caught up breathless, her flashlight trembling as she swept its beam across the tracks. For a moment, there was only rain and shadow. Then the light caught something, and their world tilted into a nightmare they'd never forget. The rain lashed Willow Hollow with unrelenting fury, a curtain of water blurring the world as the Grayson family stood frozen at the edge of the rail embankment. Ella's flashlight beam trembled in her grip, slicing through the storm's chaos until it landed on a sight that stole the breath from their lungs. 30 feet down the glistening tracks, A German shepherd lay trapped, its soaked fur matted with mud and streaks of crimson, its massive frame bound by a thick rusted chain. The metal coiled cruelly around its neck and front paws, anchoring it to the rail with a brutality that screamed of deliberate malice. The dog's eyes flashed in the light, wild, terrified, yet piercingly alive, its body straining against the bonds as it let out a broken, pleading whimper that tore through the night. "Oh, sweet mercy," Ella gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, tears mingling with the rain on her cheeks. Nathan's face hardened, his steady hands tightening around Jamie's small frame as the boy wriggled free, pointing with a trembling finger. "There he is!" Jamie cried, his voice a raw burst of love and fear. "He needs me!" The dog's head lifted at the sound, its gaze locking onto Jamie with an intensity that felt almost human, a silent call that echoed the one he'd heard through the storm. The train horn blared again, closer now, its mournful wail a cold blade slicing through the tempest, the ground beneath them trembling with the promise of its approach. Nathan slid down the muddy embankment, his boots sinking into the sodden earth as he shouted over his shoulder, "Ella, keep Jamie up there!" But Jamie broke from her grasp, his small body scrambling after his father with a ferocity that belied his 5 years. "No, I have to help him," he sobbed, his raincoat flapping as he slipped down the slope, Ella's desperate cry, "Jamie, no!" Lost in the wind as she followed, her heart pounding with a mother's terror, the flashlight beam danced wildly as they reached the tracks, illuminating the full horror of the scene. The chain was a merciless captor, wrapped multiple times around the dog's body and locked to the rail with a heavy padlock, its rusted links biting into the animal's flesh with every futile tug. This was no accident. Someone had condemned this creature to a slow, agonizing end, a cruelty so stark it hollowed Ella's chest. The dog's cries grew sharper, more urgent, its body trembling as it fought the bonds, its eyes never leaving the family racing toward it. Nathan dropped to his knees beside the German shepherd, his hands hovering over the chain as he murmured, "Hold on, fella, we're here now." The dog whimpered, its gaze shifting to Jamie as the boy fell to his knees in the gravel, heedless of the rain soaking through his clothes. "It's okay," Jamie whispered, his small hand reaching out to touch the dog's drenched head, his voice a lifeline of tenderness. "I heard you. I came to save you." The German shepherd stilled for a heartbeat, its wild eyes softening under Jamie's touch, a fragile trust blooming amidst the terror as it licked his hand with a gentleness that broke Nathan's heart. "He's hurt bad," Ella said, her voice cracking as she knelt beside them, the flashlight revealing raw wounds where the chain had gouged the dog's neck and legs. The train's rumble grew louder, a relentless pulse vibrating through the rails, its headlights piercing the rain like twin beacons of doom. "We don't have time!" Nathan shouted, his hands grappling with the chain, pulling with all his strength, but the metal held fast, unyielding as stone. The rain slicked his grip, the rusty links cutting into his palms, and he cursed under his breath, desperation clawing at his calm. "We need to break it," he yelled, scanning the gravel for anything, a rock, a tool, to shatter the padlock. Jamie's eyes stayed fixed on the dog, his small hand stroking its fur as he whispered, "Don't be scared. We won't leave you." The German shepherd whined softly, its tail thumping once against the rail, a faint spark of hope in its fading strength. "His name's Shadow," Jamie said suddenly, his voice steady with a certainty that stunned Ella. "How do you know that?" she asked, her hands trembling as she steadied the light. Jamie didn't answer, his focus unbroken, as if the dog had whispered its soul into his. The train horn screamed again, deafening now, the ground shaking with its approach, headlights blazing through the storm, closing the distance with merciless speed. "Get back!" Nathan roared, hooking an arm under the dog's body, trying to lift it, but the chain anchored it like a curse. "Help me, Ella!" Together they pulled, their muscles straining, but the metal refused to give, the dog's weight a heartbreaking burden. "We can't move him!" Ella sobbed, her voice lost in the wind as the train's roar swallowed the night. "Shadow!" Jamie cried, wrapping his arms around the dog's neck, his small body pressed against the trembling fur. "We can't leave him!" The headlights grew blinding, the air thick with the rush of steel and fate, The squeal of brakes, a desperate, futile cry as the driver spotted them too late. Nathan lunged for Jamie, his heart seizing as he shouted, "Jamie, now!" But the boy clung tighter, tears streaming down his face, his voice a defiant hymn. "I won't let him die. I promised." Time slowed, the world narrowing, the rain, the rails, and the love in Jamie's eyes. Ella screamed, her arms reaching for her son. But then a shadow burst from the trees, a figure cloaked in the storm, rain streaming from a hooded coat, something metallic glinting in their hands. A sharp snap rang out, a flash of movement against the chaos, and the chain went slack, the padlock falling away like a broken shackle. With a surge of primal strength, Nathan grabbed Jamie and the dog, yanking them off the tracks as the train thundered past, its wind tearing at their clothes, metal screeching inches from their lives. They collapsed in the gravel, breathless, soaked, alive. Nathan clutched Jamie to his chest, his heart hammering as Ella crawled to them, her sobs a ragged song of relief. Beside them lay the German shepherd, Shadow, freed from his prison, his massive body shuddering as the severed chain dangled from his neck. The train's roar faded, its last cars vanishing into the night, leaving only the storm and the miracle of their survival. Ella's flashlight found the stranger standing a few feet away, bolt cutters in hand, his face shadowed but grim. "We need to move," he said, his voice cutting through the rain, steady yet urgent. "That dog needs help, and you're all drenched to your souls." Before Nathan could speak, Shadow let out a gurgling whimper and collapsed fully, his eyes rolling back, his strength spent. "Shadow!" Jamie cried, scrambling to his side, his small hands cradling the dog's head. The stranger knelt beside them, fingers pressing to the dog's neck. "He's alive, barely. We've got to get him warm, fast." "Who are you?" Nathan asked, helping Ella to her feet, his voice thick with gratitude and suspicion. The man's eyes met his, dark with a weight Nathan couldn't name. "Name's Caleb. Been tracking this dog for days. Knew they'd try something like this." He nodded to the bolt cutters. "Came ready, but almost too late." "They?" Ella asked, her voice shaking as she clutched Jamie closer. Caleb's jaw tightened. "The kind of monsters you don't want to meet. Now can we get him somewhere safe before he slips away?" Nathan and Caleb lifted Shadow between them, the dog's weight a testament to his fight, while Ella guided Jamie, his small hand trembling in hers. The rain washed away the blood and mud as they staggered back toward the cottage, the storm a fading echo to the courage that had bound them. Behind them, unseen in the shadows across the tracks, a figure watched, motionless, cold, its eyes glinting before melting into the dark, footprints swallowed by the deluge. The journey home was a blur of exhaustion and hope, Shadow's shallow breaths a fragile thread pulling them onward. Jamie's voice broke the silence, soft and fierce. "You're safe now, Shadow. I heard you, and I'll never let you go." In the storm's wake, a bond had ignited, a light born from the darkest night, and the Grayson family knew their lives had changed forever. The storm battered Willow Hollow with a fading fury as the Grayson family stumbled through their backyard gate, the cottage a beacon of warmth piercing the night's chaos. Rain streamed from their clothes, pooling on the earth as Nathan and Caleb carried Shadow's limp form between them, the German shepherd's massive body sagging with exhaustion and pain. Ella guided Jamie ahead, his small hand clutching hers, his blue raincoat dripping as he cast worried glances back at the dog who'd called him through the tempest. The wind howled its last protests, but the Hollow's embrace felt softer now, a fragile peace settling over their soaked, trembling frames. Nathan shouldered the kitchen door open, the familiar creak a sigh of relief as they spilled inside, water trailing across the wooden floor. "Over here!" Ella called, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands as she cleared the sturdy oak table, layering it with thick towels from the pantry. Nathan and Caleb eased Shadow onto the makeshift bed, the dog's laboured breaths rasping in the quiet, his fur matted with mud and blood that stained the white fabric beneath him. Jamie climbed onto a chair beside the table, his hazel eyes wide with a love too vast for his small frame, his hand reaching to stroke Shadow's muzzle. "You're home now, Shadow," he whispered, his voice a tender promise. "You're safe with us." In the kitchen's warm light, Shadow's injuries glared starkly. Deep gashes circled his neck and legs where the chain had bitten, his once proud coat dulled by suffering. Ella's breath hitched, tears welling as she knelt beside him, her fingers trembling over the wounds. "He's been through hell," she murmured, her heart aching for the creature who'd fought so fiercely to survive. Nathan turned to Caleb, who stood by the door, water dripping from his hooded coat, his bolt cutters still clutched like a warrior's shield. "You said you've been tracking him," Nathan said, his voice thick with gratitude and a father's need to understand. "What's going on? Who did this?" Caleb ran a hand through his wet hair, his expression a storm of its own. Grim, weary, yet softened by a flicker of hope as he glanced at Shadow. "It's a long tale," he began, his voice low and steady. "But we need to help him first. He's lost blood, and those wounds are festering." Ella nodded, already moving. "I'll call the emergency vet." She started, reaching for her phone, but Caleb's sharp "no" cut through the air, startling them all. At their wide-eyed stares, he softened, raising a hand. "I'm sorry. We can't bring anyone else into this, not yet. The people who did this, they've got eyes everywhere. If they know he's alive." Nathan stepped closer, his broad frame protective as he shielded Jamie and Ella. "Who are these people? Why should we trust you?" His voice was firm, a rock against the tide of fear swelling in the room. Caleb met his gaze, his dark eyes carrying a weight of secrets and sorrow. "My name's Caleb Harrow. I was a handler at a place called Thornwood Security, owned by a man named Victor Slade. That dog," he nodded towards Shadow, whose eyes fluttered weakly, "was one of our best, until 3 days ago, when he defied an order that broke his spirit." Ella's hand paused over Shadow's fur, her breath catching. "Defied an order?" Caleb nodded, his jaw tightening. "Slade breeds dogs for dark purposes, protection, intimidation, worse. Shadow was top tier, trained from a pup, but during a session they put him against a target, a young woman, barely more than a girl, crying, terrified. He was meant to corner her, show teeth. Instead, he lay down at her feet, whining like he was begging her forgiveness. A faint, proud smile ghosted across Caleb's lips. Slade was furious, humiliated in front of a client, called him a failure. "That's monstrous," Ella whispered, her face paling as she looked at Shadow, his chest rising and falling with shallow effort. "So they chained him to the tracks?" Caleb's eyes darkened, his voice cracking with restrained rage. "Slade loves spectacles. Ordered him put down, but shooting wasn't cruel enough for him. They chained him there, poetic, he said, a training failure ended by a train. I couldn't stop them taking him, but I followed. Been tracking him since, waiting for a chance to cut him loose. I was too late. Until you showed up." Nathan's fists clenched, his steady calm fracturing under the weight of such cruelty. "You saved us all," he said quietly, reassessing the stranger who'd plunged into their lives like a guardian from the storm. Ella's eyes softened, a tear slipping free. "You risked everything for him." Caleb shrugged, discomfort flickering across his face. "I wasn't letting Slade win. Shadow's a good soul, the best. He didn't deserve that end, just for showing mercy." Jamie, who'd listened with a solemnity beyond his years, spoke up, his voice small but fierce. "Shadow was crying for help. I heard him. Through the rain, through everything." Caleb looked at the boy, a mix of wonder and confusion in his gaze. "You heard him from here?" Jamie nodded, his hand never leaving Shadow's fur. "He called me. I had to help." The adults exchanged glances, a quiet awe settling over them. How could a child sense such a distant plea through walls and wind? Yet the truth lay before them, undeniable in Shadow's trusting eyes. A weak whimper drew them back to the table. Shadow's gaze flickered, unfocused, his tail thumping once against the towels. Shadow! Jamie cried, leaning closer, his small hand cupping the dog's face. You're awake! Caleb moved to his side, his touch gentle but urgent. We need to clean these wounds. Do you have a first aid kit, something strong, antiseptic? Ella nodded, hurrying to the bathroom, her steps quick with purpose, while Nathan filled bowls with warm water, his hands steady despite the storm still raging in his chest. Together they worked, Ella returning with bandages and antiseptic, Caleb guiding them with a handler's skill. They washed away mud and blood, revealing the depth of Shadow's suffering, older scars beneath the fresh wounds, burns and cuts from a life of harsh training. These aren't just from tonight, Caleb said grimly, cleaning a half-healed mark on Shadow's flank. Slade's methods, they leave marks on more than the body. Jamie's eyes filled with tears, his voice trembling. Did the bad man hurt him a lot? Caleb met the boy's gaze, steady and honest. Yes, Jamie. But Shadow never lost his heart. That's why he didn't hurt that girl, why he fought to reach you. Ella dabbed antiseptic on Shadow's neck, her touch tender as she murmured, He's so strong. Caleb nodded, a flicker of pride in his eyes. He sensed her fear, real fear, not staged. That target wasn't an actor. I overheard Slade later. She was a pawn, kidnapped to force her father's hand in some deal. Shadow knew, and he chose mercy over orders. That's why Slade wanted him gone. What kind of place trains dogs for that? Nathan asked, his voice hard with disgust as he wrung out a bloodied cloth. Caleb's silence was heavy, over Shadow's fur. Not a place you'd call security, he said at last. More like a den of wolves. Slade's just the alpha. Ella paused, her eyes blazing with a mother's fire. You need to tell someone, police, anyone. This man tried to murder Shadow in cold blood. Caleb shook his head, his voice low. Slade's got half the local force in his pocket. The rest are too scared to cross him. My word against his. He'd twist it, call me a disgruntled ex-employee. So we do nothing? Nathan demanded, his hands balling into fists. Pretend my son didn't nearly die out there. Caleb's gaze hardened, resolute. No, I disappear. You forget me. Care for Shadow if you can, or find him a home far from here. Don't tell anyone where he came from or about me. Jamie's head snapped up, his voice a desperate cry. No, you can't go. Shadow needs you. The bad man will come back. Shadow whined softly, his eyes flickering to Caleb, a plea mirrored in the boy's words. Nathan looked at his son, then at the dog whose life they'd fought for, and finally at Caleb, a stranger turned savior. He's right, he said slowly. We can't ignore this. If Slade finds out Shadow's alive... Caleb started to protest, but Nathan cut him off, his voice a vow. You know him, his reach. Stay with us, at least for now. Safety in numbers. Ella nodded, her resolve firm. We're in this together now. You're not facing this alone. Caleb hesitated, his walls crumbling under their unwavering trust. Okay, he relented, his voice soft with gratitude. Until Shadow's out of danger, and we figure out what's next. Jamie smiled, a spark of hope in his tear-streaked face. Good. Shadow needs all of us. As if in agreement, Shadow's tail thumped weakly, his eyes meeting Jamie's with a bond that needed no words. Outside, the storm softened, rain tapping gently against the windows. But inside the Grayson kitchen, a quiet strength took root, a family united by a dog's courage, ready to face the shadows ahead. The storm's roar softened to a whisper over Willow Hollow, the rain now a gentle patter against the Grayson cottage's windows, as if the night itself held its breath for the fragile life within. The kitchen glowed with a tender warmth, the hearth's flicker casting dancing shadows across the oak table where Shadow lay, his massive frame cradled on a nest of towels, his breathing rasped, shallow and uneven, but his eyes, those deep, soulful wells, flickered with a spark of fight, tethered to the small boy who refused to leave his side. Jamie perched on a chair beside him, his small hand resting on Shadow's head, his hazel gaze unwavering. as if his love alone could stitch the German shepherd's wounds closed. Ella moved with quiet urgency, her hands steady as she bandaged Shadow's gashes with supplies from the first aid kit, her touch a mother's balm against the cruelty etched into his fur. Nathan knelt beside her, soaking cloths in warm water to clean the mud and blood, his steady presence a rock amidst the storm they'd weathered. Caleb stood watch, his silhouette framed against the kitchen window, his dark eyes scanning the misty yard beyond, bolt cutters still clutched like a talisman of their narrow escape. The air thrummed with a fragile hope, a silent vow woven between them to protect the dog who'd bound their hearts in a single, desperate night. "He's tougher than he looks," Caleb said, his voice low but laced with pride as he turned from the window, watching Ella wrap a bandage around Shadow's torn neck. "He's been through worse and kept going." Jamie's head tilted, his small face scrunching with concern. "Worse than the train?" he asked, his voice trembling with the weight of imagining more pain. Caleb nodded, kneeling beside the boy, his gaze softening. "Slade's training. It's not kind, Jamie. Burns, beatings. Shadow took it all and never broke. That's why he's special, why he chose mercy when they wanted malice." Ella's hands paused, tears brimming as she met Caleb's eyes. "He's a miracle," she whispered, her fingers tracing the edge of a scar older than the night's wounds. "To survive that, and still trust us." Shadow whined softly, his tail thumping once against the table, and Jamie leaned closer, his breath warm against the dog's ear. "You're brave, Shadow," he murmured, his voice a melody of adoration. "The bravest ever." The German shepherd's eyes fluttered, locking onto Jamie's with a trust that melted the room's edges, a bond forged in the storm now blooming in the quiet. Nathan wrung out a cloth, his jaw tight as he glanced at Caleb. "He's stable for now, but he needs more than we can give. Antibiotics, stitches." Caleb nodded, his hands deft as he cleaned a deep cut on Shadow's flank. "I've got field medic training, army before the dogs. I can patch him up, keep infection at bay for a bit. But yeah, he'll need a vet soon." Ella fetched a bottle of antiseptic, her resolve hardening. "We'll make do tonight. He's fought too hard to lose him now." They worked in a rhythm of care, cleaning, bandaging, soothing, each touch a promise to the dog who'd defied death for them. Shadow lay still, his strength waning but his spirit unbroken, his eyes following Jamie's every move with a devotion that tugged at their souls. "He's watching me," Jamie said, a shy smile breaking through his worry as he fed Shadow a small piece of chicken Ella had warmed from leftovers. "He knows I'm here." Caleb smiled faintly, a rare warmth softening his guarded edges. "He's always been sharp, reads people better than most humans. And you, kid, you're something he's never had before." "What's that?" Nathan asked, pausing to rinse his hands, his curiosity piqued. Caleb's gaze lingered on Jamie, a flicker of wonder in his eyes. "Someone pure, someone who hears him without words." Slade's world was cold, calculated. "Shadow's never known a heart like your boy's." Jamie blushed, ducking his head, but his hand stayed on Shadow's fur, a lifeline neither could sever. Ella's heart swelled, her voice trembling with pride. "He heard him through a storm, Caleb. I don't understand it, but I'll never doubt it." The night deepened, the cottage a cocoon of light against the hollow's shadows. They took turns tending Shadow, exhaustion tugging at their limbs, but none willing to leave his side. Ella brought Jamie a blanket, coaxing him to rest, but he shook his head, curling up on the floor beside the table instead, his hands stretched up to touch Shadow's paw. "I'm staying with him," he said, his voice firm with a child's unyielding love. Nathan draped the blanket over him, his throat tight as he watched his son drift into a fitful sleep. Shadow's soft whine a lullaby only they shared. Caleb stayed by the table, his voice a low murmur as he spoke to Shadow, words too quiet for the others to catch. Memories, perhaps, of a time when he'd trained this dog with care before darkness claimed their world. Nathan joined Ella by the sink, their hands brushing as they washed the last of the bloodied cloths. "He's part of us now," Nathan said, his voice rough with emotion. "Whatever comes next, we're not letting him go." Ella nodded, her eyes glistening. Jamie knew. He felt him out there. They're tied together somehow. Dawn crept in, grey and gentle, the storm's remnants a soft drizzle against the roof. Shadow stirred, his head lifting slightly, ears twitching as a low growl rumbled in his chest. Caleb was on his feet in an instant, moving silently to the window, his hand pressing against the glass as he peered into the mist. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, Shadow's growl deepening, his eyes fixed on the yard beyond. Nathan joined him, tension coiling in his shoulders. "Trouble?" he asked, his voice hushed. "Not sure," Caleb replied, his gaze sweeping the stillness. "He's sensing something. Someone." The fur along Shadow's spine bristled, his weakened body tensing as if ready to defend despite the pain. Jamie stirred, rubbing sleep from his eyes, his hand finding Shadow's fur instinctively. "What's wrong?" he mumbled, sitting up. Caleb kept his voice low, steady. "Shadow's worried. Stay quiet, okay?" Jamie nodded, his small frame pressing closer to the dog, a silent pact of protection. For a long moment they watched the yard, empty, serene, the mist curling around the trees like a shroud. Then Nathan's breath caught, his finger pointing subtly. "There, by the fence." A shadow shifted, darker than the dawn, a figure barely discernible against the grey light, there and gone in a heartbeat. "Did you see it?" he whispered, his heart pounding. Caleb's face tightened, a grim certainty settling over him. "Yeah, too quick to be sure, but Shadow's not growling for nothing." Ella joined them, her voice trembling but fierce. "Slade's men?" Caleb nodded slowly. "Maybe. Could be they tracked us, followed the mud, checked the hollow. They'd want to know if Shadow survived." Jamie's eyes widened, his hand tightening on Shadow's fur. "They can't have him," he said, his voice a small but defiant flame. "He's ours now." Shadow whined, nudging Jamie's hand, his eyes gleaming with a loyalty that broke Ella's heart anew. "We need to call someone. Police, rangers," Ella urged, her protective instinct flaring. Caleb shook his head, his tone resolute. "Slade's reach is long, cops won't help, not yet. We'd just tip him off, paint a target on us." Nathan's fists clenched, his voice hard. "So we wait for them to come? Hope they don't find us." Caleb's gaze met his, steady with a soldier's resolve. "No. We get Shadow strong enough to move, then we run, somewhere safe. I've got a place, a cabin in the pines, 30 miles out, off the grid. We can figure our next step there." "With a hurt dog and a 5-year-old? Ella asked, doubt shadowing her hope. Caleb's jaw set, his voice firm. "It's our shot. Slade expects roads, cars, we go through the woods, throw them off." Before they could argue, Shadow's head snapped up again, his growls sharper, his eyes locked on the window. The air thickened, a chill creeping in as the dawn revealed more than mist, a distant crunch of gravel, the faint hum of an engine cutting through the quiet. "They're coming," Caleb said, his voice a blade of certainty. "We don't have much time." Nathan looked at his family. Jamie's fierce love, Ella's quiet strength, Shadow's unwavering spirit, and nodded, his heart steeling for the fight ahead. "Then we move, together." In the hollow's tender embrace, a new storm loomed, but within the Grayson cottage, a light burned brighter, a bond forged in courage, ready to face the shadows creeping closer. The dawn light bled through the mist cloaking Willow Hollow, a pale grey veil that softened the edges of the Grayson cottage but couldn't hide the menace creeping closer. Inside, the kitchen thrummed with urgency, the air thick with the scent of antiseptic, and the quiet resolve of a family bound by love and a German shepherd's unwavering spirit. Shadow lay on the oak table, his bandaged wounds stark against his matted fur, his breaths shallow but steady, his eyes flickering with a fire that refused to dim. Jamie knelt beside him, his small hand pressed to the dog's head, his hazel gaze fierce with a promise only a child's heart could make. Caleb stood by the window, his silhouette taut as he peered into the yard, the faint hum of an engine growing louder, a predator's growl stalking through the hollow. "Black SUV?" he muttered, his voice a low blade cutting through the stillness. "Tinted windows. Could be anyone, but I bet my life it's Slade's men." Nathan joined him, his broad frame tense, his steady hands curling into fists. "They're here for Shadow," he said, his tone hard with a father's protective fury. "How'd they find us so fast?" Caleb's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. "Tracks in the mud, maybe. Or they're sweeping every house near the rail line. Doesn't matter, they know he's not dead and Slade won't rest till he is." Jamie's head snapped up, his voice trembling but defiant. "Shadow says the bad man's coming. He says we need to hide. Now." The German shepherd's hackles rose, a low growl rumbling in his chest, his gaze locked on the window, as if he could see the threat through the mist. Ella's heart skipped, her hands clutching a bowl of warm water as she exchanged a glance with Nathan. Jamie's words, uncanny and true, a thread of magic they couldn't unravel. "There's no time to argue," Caleb said, his voice sharp with command, as he turned from the window. "Laundry room. Back exit to the side yard. We take your car. Move fast." Nathan nodded, his decision made in a heartbeat. "Ella, get Jamie dressed. Grab what you can carry." Ella set the bowl down, her hands trembling as she pulled Jamie's blanket aside, coaxing him toward the stairs. "Come on, sweet boy. We're keeping Shadow safe." Jamie clung to Shadow's fur a moment longer, his eyes glistening. "I'll be right back," he whispered, and the dog whined softly, nudging his hand as if sealing their pact. Ella raced upstairs with Jamie, her mind a whirl of fear and determination, grabbing his shoes, a jacket, a small bag of essentials, each item a lifeline in their flight. Nathan helped Caleb ease Shadow off the table, the dog's legs trembling but holding as they supported his weight. "You're a fighter, aren't you?" Nathan murmured, his voice thick with awe as Shadow leaned into him, trusting despite the pain. Caleb's gaze softened, a flicker of pride breaking through his guarded shell. "Always has been." The doorbell rang, a sharp, jarring note that shattered the fragile quiet, freezing them all in place. "Mr. and Mrs. Grayson," a voice called, smooth and clipped, laced with a false calm. "We need to talk. Police business about last night's incident near the rail line." Caleb's eyes met Nathan's, a silent warning flashing between them. "Not police," he mouthed, his hand tightening on Shadow's scruff. Nathan nodded, his heart pounding as he urged them toward the laundry room. "They're buying time," he whispered. "Keep moving." The bell rang again, more insistent, followed by a heavy knock that rattled the frame. "Open up, or we'll have to come in," the voice barked, its civility fraying. Then came a sound that chilled Nathan's blood, the scrape of metal against the lock, a predator testing its prey. "They're picking it," Caleb hissed, his voice a whip of urgency. "Now!" They slipped into the laundry room, Shadow limping valiantly beside them, his strength a miracle against his wounds. Ella and Jamie met them at the back door, her face pale but fierce, Jamie's small hand clutching a toy train, his anchor in the chaos. They spilled into the side yard, the mist cool against their flushed skin, the SUV's rumble now a menacing pulse just beyond the house. "Garage," Nathan whispered, pointing to the detached building 30 yards away. "Back road through the field. We can lose them there." Caleb scooped Shadow into his arms, the dog's weight a burden he bore without complaint, while Nathan grabbed Jamie, Ella right behind, her breath ragged as they ran. The crunch of gravel echoed from the driveway, car doors slamming, voices barking orders, Slade's men closing the net. Halfway to the garage, the front door burst open, the crash reverberating through the hollow. "Go!" Caleb urged, his voice a desperate plea as he set Shadow down inside the garage, the dog's legs splaying briefly before he steadied himself. Nathan fumbled with his keys, unlocking the side door, his hands shaking as he ushered Ella and Jamie into their old SUV. "Start it," Caleb said, moving to the main garage door. "I'll open it manually." "Quieter." Nathan slid behind the wheel, the engine purring to life with a soft hum, his eyes flicking to the rear view as Ella buckled Jamie into his booster seat. Caleb peered through the garage window, ducking low. "They're coming." "Heard the car," he whispered, his breath sharp. Jamie leaned forward, his voice small but urgent. "Shadow says go now. The bad men have guns." Caleb didn't question it, his hands flying to the manual release, disengaging the motor with a sharp pull. "When I lift, drive straight out. Don't stop," he told Nathan, positioning himself at the door. "What about you and Shadow?" Ella asked, her voice tight with fear as she clutched Jamie's hand. "We'll jump in back. Be ready," Caleb replied, glancing at Shadow, who stood alert despite his trembling limbs. "Ready, boy?" The German Shepherd gave a soft woof, his eyes gleaming with a resolve that broke Nathan's heart. "On 3, Caleb said, gripping the door. 1, 2, 3. He heaved the metal upward, the rattle loud in the dawn's hush, and Nathan gunned the engine, the SUV lurching forward as Caleb and Shadow scrambled aside. "There they are!" A shout erupted from the house, 2 figures in dark suits emerging, weapons glinting in the mist. Caleb hurled Shadow into the SUV's open back, diving in after him as Nathan floored it, the sharp crack of gunfire splitting the air. A bullet pinged off the bumper, the SUV swerving as Nathan hunched over the wheel, his knuckles white. "Down!" Caleb yelled, shielding Shadow with his body, Ella pulling Jamie below the window, her arms a fortress around her son. More shots rang out, fading as they hit the main road, tires squealing as Nathan pushed the vehicle to its limits. "Are they following?" Nathan demanded, eyes darting to the mirror. Caleb peered out the back, his breath ragged. "Black Escalade, they're piling in. They'll be on us." "Which way?" Nathan barked, an intersection looming ahead. "Left," Caleb directed, "then second right, off the main roads." Nathan obeyed, the SUV bouncing over ruts, the hollow's familiar lanes giving way to a maze of backroads. Shadow whimpered, the jolts tearing at his wounds. But Jamie reached back, his small hand finding the dog's fur. "It's okay, Shadow," he soothed, his voice a balm. "We won't let them get you." For 30 tense minutes they wove through the countryside, Caleb's directions guiding them past farms and into dense forest, the road narrowing to a dirt track. "Fallen oak ahead," Caleb said, pointing. "Left before it. Hidden trail." Nathan slowed, spotting the overgrown path, branches scraping the SUV as they plunged deeper into the pines. "This isn't on maps," Caleb explained, his voice steadying. "Bought it under a fake name, Cash. Slade won't find it." The trees parted to reveal a clearing, a rustic cabin nestled within, a sanctuary carved from the wild. Nathan parked close, turning the SUV for a quick escape, the engine's hum fading into silence. They sat, breathless, the weight of their flight sinking in. "What now?" Ella asked, her voice a fragile thread. Caleb opened the back, lifting Shadow gently. "Inside, settle in. I'll check his wounds. Then we plan." Shadow's eyes met Jamie's, a silent vow passing between them, and the boy nodded, his small hand reaching out. "We're safe now, Shadow," he said, his voice trembling with hope. "I promise." The cabin door creaked open, the forest's embrace a shield against the hollow's lurking shadows. But as they stepped inside, the echo of pursuit lingered, a whisper on the wind, a reminder that safety was fleeting, and the fight for Shadow's life was far from over. The cabin stood like a sentinel in the pine-shadowed clearing, its weathered logs a quiet defiance against the chaos the Grayson family had fled. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and resin, the forest's hush a stark contrast to the gunfire still ringing in their ears. Nathan carried Shadow inside, the German Shepherd's massive frame limp but warm in his arms, while Caleb held the door, his dark eyes sweeping the trees for any sign of pursuit. Ella guided Jamie through the threshold, his small hand clutching hers, his toy train a talisman against the fear shadowing his hazel gaze. The SUV sat silent outside, its engine cooling, a fragile lifeline tethered to their escape. Inside, the cabin was a Spartan refuge, wooden floors worn smooth by time, a stone fireplace dominating one wall, a single room with a loft above and a small kitchen nook. Dust motes danced in the slivers of dawn filtering through cracked shutters, the air cool and still, as if the world beyond had paused to let them breathe. Nathan laid Shadow on a threadbare rug near the hearth, the dog's bandaged wound stark against his black and tan fur, his chest rising with shallow effort. Jamie dropped to his knees beside him, a small hand stroking Shadow's muzzle, his voice a soft hymn of reassurance. "We're here, Shadow. No bad men can find us now." Ella set their meager bag of essentials on a rickety table, her hands trembling as she lit a lantern, its glow banishing the gloom. "It's safe, right?" she asked Caleb, her voice tight with a mother's need for certainty. Caleb nodded, bolting the door behind them, his movements precise, a soldier's habit. "No one knows this place. Not Slade, not his crew. I've kept it off every grid. But we can't let our guard down." He moved to Shadow, kneeling to check the bandages, his touch gentle but practiced. "He's holding on. Tougher than I thought after that ride." Nathan fetched a stack of firewood from a corner pile, his steady hands building a blaze in the hearth, the crackle of flames a fragile comfort against the chill seeping through the walls. "He's a miracle," he said, watching Shadow's eyes flicker open, locking onto Jamie with a trust that pierced his soul. After all he's been through. Caleb's jaw tightened, a shadow crossing his face as he adjusted a bandage on Shadow's neck. "He's got a reason to fight now, your boy. Never had that before, not with me or Slade." Jamie looked up, his small face alight with a quiet wonder. "Shadow says thank you," he said, his voice steady with that uncanny certainty that had guided them through the storm. Caleb's hands paused, his gaze meeting Ella's in silent question. "He talks to you?" he asked, his tone careful, probing. Jamie nodded, his fingers tracing Shadow's ear. "Not words like us, but I feel him. He's happy we're here, but he's scared too. The bad man's still out there." Ella's breath caught, her heart swelling with a mix of awe and unease. "Jamie's always been sensitive," she said, her voice soft as she sat beside him, smoothing his dark curls. "But this, it's different. It's like they're connected." Nathan joined them, his broad frame settling on the rug, his eyes searching his son's face. "You heard him through a storm, Sprout. Saved his life. I don't know how, but I believe it." Jamie smiled, a shy spark of pride breaking through his worry, and Shadow whined softly, nudging his hand as if to agree. Caleb leaned back, his expression softening with a rare vulnerability. "In training, Shadow always read me. Knew when I was tense, when I needed him sharp. But this," he shook his head, marveling. "This is deeper. Slade never saw that in him. Just a tool. You've given him something more, Jamie." The boy's eyes glistened, his small hand tightening on Shadow's fur. "He's my friend. I won't let the bad man take him." The fire's warmth spread, thawing the tension in their bones, and for a moment they rested, Ella brewing tea from a tin Caleb unearthed, Nathan tending Shadow's water bowl, Jamie whispering to the dog as if sharing secrets only they understood. Shadow's tail thumped weakly, his strength returning in flickers, his presence a heartbeat anchoring their fragile sanctuary. But the peace was fleeting, a thin veneer over the danger lurking beyond the pines. Caleb stood, pacing to a small window, his silhouette taut against the growing light. "They'll keep looking," he said, his voice low, resolute. "Slade's not the type to let a loose end dangle, especially not one that defied him." Nathan rose, his steady calm hardening into resolve. "Then we need a plan, not just hiding. We can't run forever." Ella nodded, her protective fire flaring. "He tried to kill Shadow, almost got us too. We can't let him walk away from that." Caleb turned, his eyes dark with a weight of experience. "Slade's untouchable. Money, muscle, connections going straight at him's a death sentence. But there's another way. He crossed to a dusty trunk in the corner, flipping it open to reveal a stash of gear, maps, a burner phone, a small recorder, a battered notebook. I've been gathering dirt on him since I left Thornwood. Names, dates. Enough to make someone listen if we get it to the right hands. Nathan crouched beside him, scanning the notebook's cramped scrawl. Lists of clients, drop points, coded orders. "This is evidence?" he asked, his voice thick with hope and doubt. Caleb nodded. "Fragments, nothing airtight yet, but with Shadow alive and your story, it's a start. Problem is we need someone outside Slade's reach. Someone clean." Ella's brow furrowed, her mind racing. "What about Federal, FBI? They'd have to take this seriously, right?" "Maybe," Caleb said, his tone cautious. "But we'd need to move fast before Slade tracks us. He'll burn this hollow to the ground if he thinks Shadow's still breathing." Jamie's voice piped up, small but fierce. "Shadow says we fight. He doesn't want to run anymore." The German shepherd's ears twitched, his growl a low rumble of agreement, his eyes gleaming with a fire that belied his wounds. Caleb's lips quirked, a faint smile breaking through. Guess he's made up his mind. Nathan stood, his decision settling like stone. "Then we fight. Smart. We get this to someone who can bury Slade, but we keep Shadow safe first." Ella nodded, her resolve mirroring his. "I'll call my cousin Mara. She's a paralegal in the city, knows people. We can trust her to find a contact." Caleb handed her the burner phone, his voice steady. "Keep it short. No names, no location. Just enough to get her moving." Ella stepped to the kitchen nook, her fingers trembling as she dialed. The call a lifeline cast into the unknown. "Mara, it's me. I need a favor. Big one. No questions, just listen." Her voice faded into a hushed urgency, leaving Nathan and Caleb to plan with Shadow's quiet strength between them. "We'll need a drop point," Caleb said, unfolding a map. "Somewhere public, safe, 2 hours from here, a park maybe." Nathan traced a route, his finger settling on a spot. "Elmwood Reserve. Busy enough to blend in, quiet enough to spot trouble." Jamie watched, his small frame curled beside Shadow, his toy train rolling absently in his hand. "Shadow says he'll protect us," he murmured, his voice a thread of faith weaving through their strategy. Nathan knelt, pulling his son close, his heart swelling with a father's pride. "And we'll protect him, Sprout. Together." Shadow's tail thumped, a promise sealed in the firelight, his bond with Jamie alight against the shadows creeping closer. Outside, the pines stood silent, their branches swaying in the dawn breeze, but a distant rustle, a twig snapping under a cautious step, sent Caleb to the window, his hand tightening on the recorder. "We've got company," he whispered, his voice a blade of warning. Shadow's growl deepened, his body tensing, ready to defend despite the pain. Nathan grabbed a poker from the hearth, Ella ending her call with a sharp, "Hurry!" as she joined them, Jamie's small hand clutching Shadow's fur. The cabin's sanctuary trembled, the fight they'd vowed to wage now knocking at their door, and in the flicker of the flames, their resolve burned brighter. A family united, a dog's courage their shield. The cabin's sanctuary trembled under the weight of encroaching danger, the pines outside whispering secrets of pursuit as dawn's fragile light bled through the shutters. Inside, the Grayson family stood poised, their breaths shallow, the hearth's glow casting long shadows across the wooden floor. Shadow's growl rumbled low and fierce, his bandaged body tense beside Jamie, his ears pricked toward the rustle beyond the walls. A predator's tread in the forest's embrace. Nathan gripped the fireplace poker, his knuckles white, his steady frame a bulwark between his family and the threat lurking in the mist. Ella clutched the burner phone, her call to Mara a lifeline now hanging by a thread, while Caleb positioned himself near the door, his recorder tucked into his jacket, his dark eyes sharp with a soldier's focus. "They're here," Caleb whispered, his voice a taut wire as he peered through a crack in the shutter, the glint of movement flickering among the trees. 2, maybe 3, armed. Shadow's hackles rose, his growl deepening into a warning that vibrated through the room. His eyes locked on the door as if he could see the danger through the wood. Jamie pressed closer to him, his small hand buried in the German shepherd's fur, his voice trembling but resolute. "Shadow says don't let them in. He'll fight. He won't let them hurt us." Nathan's heart clenched, his gaze darting to his son, the uncanny bond between boy and dog a beacon in the chaos. "Stay with Shadow, Sprout," he said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. "Ella, get him behind the table." Ella nodded, her protective fire flaring as she pulled Jamie and Shadow to the kitchen nook, tipping the rickety table onto its side as a makeshift shield. "Down, sweet boy," she urged, her arms wrapping around him, Shadow crouching beside them, his weakened frame trembling with a courage that defied his wounds. A sharp knock rattled the door, the sound a gunshot in the stillness, followed by a voice, smooth, cold, laced with menace. "Open up, Harrow. We know you're in there, and we know you've got the mutt. Hand him over, and this ends easy." Caleb's jaw tightened, his hand hovering over the bolt, his whisper fierce. "Slade's enforcer. Reyes. He doesn't bluff." Nathan stepped closer, his poker raised, his voice low. "What's the play?" Caleb's eyes met his, a grim resolve flickering within. "We stall. Buy time for Mara's contact. They won't shoot blind. Not yet." Another knock, heavier, the door shuddering under a fist. "Last chance, Harrow. You're out of moves," Reyes barked, his tone fraying with impatience. Caleb raised his voice, steady but edged with defiance. "You're trespassing, Reyes. No warrant, no jurisdiction. Walk away." A low chuckle seeped through the wood, chilling the air. "Jurisdiction, cute. Open the door or we burn this place down with you in it, dog and all." Shadow's growl erupted into a snarl, his teeth bared as he lunged toward the door, his pain forgotten in a surge of primal fury. Jamie grabbed his scruff, his small voice a desperate plea. "No, Shadow, stay." The German shepherd froze, trembling under the boy's touch, his eyes blazing with a loyalty that broke Ella's heart. "He's protecting us," she whispered, tears streaking her face as she held Jamie tighter. Caleb shot them a glance, his decision snapping into place. "Nathan, back window. We're not waiting for them to torch us." Nathan darted to the small window above the sink, prying it open with a grunt, the hinges groaning as cool forest air rushed in. "It's tight, but we can make it," he said, his voice urgent as he scanned the clearing beyond. No movement yet, the pines a shield for their escape. Caleb grabbed Shadow's collar, guiding the dog toward the sink, his tone firm but gentle. "Up, boy. You first." Shadow whined, his legs wobbling as Caleb and Nathan hoisted him through, his bandaged body scraping the frame before he landed with a soft thud outside, his growl muffled by the mist. The door splintered under a sudden blow, wood cracking as Reyes's patience shattered. "Enough games!" he roared, a boot slamming against the frame. Caleb shoved the table against the door, buying seconds, his voice a whip. "Ella! Jamie, go!" Ella lifted Jamie through the window, his small frame slipping easily into Nathan's waiting arms outside, her heart pounding as she followed, her jacket snagging on the sill. Caleb was last, diving through as the door buckled, a gunshot splitting the air, the bullet burying itself in the wall where he'd stood moments before. They hit the ground running, Nathan scooping Jamie into his arms, Ella steadying Shadow as Caleb led the way, his bolt cutters swinging from his belt. A weapon now, not just a tool. The forest swallowed them, branches clawing at their clothes, the damp earth muffling their steps as shouts erupted behind them. "Fan out, they're running!" Reyes's voice cut through the trees, boots pounding the dirt, the crack of a radio signaling more hunters on their trail. "Head for the ridge!" Caleb panted, pointing to a rise ahead, its slope cloaked in dense undergrowth. "There's a creek beyond. Covers our tracks." Nathan nodded, his breath ragged as he shifted Jamie's weight, the boy's arms tight around his neck. "Shadow says they're close," Jamie whispered, his voice trembling with a fear he couldn't hide. The German shepherd limped beside Ella, his ears swiveling, his growl a constant thread of warning as he pressed against her leg, guiding her with an instinct sharper than sight. Gunfire erupted again, a bullet shredding leaves above their heads, the sharp report echoing through the pines. "Down!" Caleb yelled, dropping to a crouch, the family following as Shadow snarled, his body shielding Jamie despite the pain ripping through him. "They're guessing. Can't see us yet," Caleb hissed, his eyes scanning the ridge. "Move! Now!" They scrambled forward, the slope steepening, roots snagging their feet as the creek's faint gurgle promised sanctuary. Ella's hand slipped on wet moss, her knee slamming into the earth, but Shadow nudged her up, his strength a miracle against his faltering gait. "Good boy," she gasped, tears mingling with sweat as they crested the ridge, the creek glinting below, a narrow ribbon of hope. Nathan set Jamie down, helping Ella lower Shadow into the shallow water, the cold soaking his bandages but washing away the scent. Caleb splashed in last, his voice urgent. "Upstream. There's a cave 1/2 mile in, we hold there." The icy current bit at their legs, the rocks slick underfoot, but they pressed on, Shadow's determination afire driving them forward. His growls faded to whimpers, his body trembling as blood seeped through his bandages, the effort tearing at his wounds. Jamie clung to his side, his small hands steadying him, his voice a lifeline. "You can do it, Shadow. We're almost there." The German shepherd's ears flicked, his eyes meeting Jamie's with a trust that fueled their flight, a bond stronger than the bullets chasing them. The cave loomed ahead, a dark maw carved into the creek bank, its entrance veiled by overhanging ferns. Caleb parted the greenery, ushering them inside, the damp stone cool against their flushed skin. Nathan pulled Shadow in, the dog collapsing onto the mossy floor, his breaths ragged but alive. Ella gathered Jamie close, her arms a fortress as they huddled in the shadows, the creek's murmur masking their gasps. Caleb crouched at the entrance, his recorder clutched tight, his ears straining for pursuit. Minutes stretched, the forest holding its breath, until a distant shout broke the silence, faint, frustrated, fading downstream. "They've lost us," Caleb whispered, his voice a thread of relief. "For now." Nathan sank beside Shadow, his hand resting on the dog's flank, his steady calm fraying under the weight of their escape. "He's bleeding again," he said, his tone thick with worry. Ella checked the bandages, her fingers trembling as she pressed a cloth to a reopened wound. "He needs more than we can give here." Jamie's eyes glistened, his small voice fierce. "Shadow says he won't give up, he'll stay with us." The German shepherd whined, his tail thumping once, his gaze locked on the boy who'd heard his soul through a storm. Caleb's face softened, a rare awe breaking through his guard. "Then we don't give up either. Mara's contact, Elmwood Reserve, 2 hours from here. We get there, hand off the evidence, end this." Nathan nodded, his resolve hardening. "We rest, patch him up, move at dusk. Less chance they spot us." Ella's hand found his, their fingers intertwining, a silent vow in the cave's dim light. Outside, the creek flowed on, a shield against the hunters, but within, a family's courage burned, a light forged by a dog's loyalty, ready to face the shadows still stalking their trail. The cave's damp embrace cocooned the Grayson family in a fragile stillness. The creek's soft gurgle, a lullaby masking their ragged breaths. Shadows danced across the mossy walls, cast by slivers of daylight piercing the fern-draped entrance, illuminating the huddled forms of Nathan, Ella, Jamie, and Caleb around the German shepherd who'd bound their fates. Shadow lay on the cool stone, his bandaged body trembling with each shallow breath, his black and tan fur matted with blood and water, yet his eyes, those deep, soulful wells, gleamed with a resilience that held them together. Jamie curled beside him, his small hand pressed to the dog's flank, his hazel gaze unwavering, a beacon of hope in the dimness. Ella knelt over Shadow, her hands gentle as she adjusted a bandage, the cloth stained crimson where his wounds had reopened in their flight. "He's so weak," she murmured, her voice trembling with a mother's fear, her fingers brushing his fur as if her touch could mend him. Nathan sat beside her, his steady hands unpacking their small bag, water, a spare shirt torn into strips, a packet of crackers, his calm fracturing under the weight of Shadow's suffering. "He's a fighter," he said, his tone firm with a father's resolve. He got us this far. We'll get him through. Caleb crouched near the entrance, his recorder clutched tight, his dark eyes scanning the creek beyond for any ripple of pursuit. They've gone downstream, he whispered, his voice a thread of relief laced with caution. But they'll double back. Reyes doesn't quit. He turned to Shadow, his expression softening with a handler's pride. You're tougher than they know, boy. Always were. Shadow's tail thumped once, a faint spark of strength, his gaze flickering to Jamie as if drawing life from the boy's unshakable faith. Jamie's voice broke the quiet, small but steady. Shadow says he's tired, but he won't leave us. He says we need to go soon. Ella's breath caught, her hand pausing over the dog's wounds as she met Nathan's eyes, a silent question passing between them. How could their son hear what they couldn't? Yet the truth lay undeniable in Shadow's trusting gaze, in the way his ears twitched at Jamie's words. Then we move at dusk, Nathan said, his decision settling like stone. Elmwood Reserve, 2 hours. We get that recorder to Mara's contact, end this nightmare. Ella nodded, tearing the shirt into fresh bandages, her hands steadying with purpose. We'll keep him warm till then. Give him strength. She draped her jacket over Shadow, tucking it around his trembling frame, while Nathan offered him water from a cupped hand, the dog lapping weakly but eagerly. Caleb rummaged through his pockets, pulling out a small vial, painkillers from his field kit. For emergencies, he said, crushing one into a cracker and feeding it to Shadow. It'll dull the edge, keep him going. The hours crept by, the cave a sanctuary in a prison, the family tending Shadow with a quiet rhythm, water, warmth, whispered encouragements. Jamie stayed glued to his side, his toy train rolling absently in his hand, his voice a soft litany of love. You're the bravest, Shadow. We're going to make it. All of us. The German shepherd's eyes fluttered, his whine softening to a sigh, his bond with Jamie a lifeline threading through the pain. As dusk painted the sky in hues of amber and grey, Caleb checked the creek again, the forest's hush unbroken by pursuit. Time, he said, his voice low but urgent. They'll expect us to hole up. We use that. Nathan lifted Shadow gently, the dog's weight a burden he bore with a father's strength, while Ella guided Jamie, his small hand clutching hers. Caleb led, parting the ferns, the cool air sharp against their flush skin as they waded upstream, the water masking their trail. The journey to Elmwood Reserve stretched into a grueling march, the forest giving way to fields and backroads, each step a test of Shadow's fading endurance. Nathan carried him when he faltered, Caleb spelling him when his arms burned, the dog's trust in them a silent vow. Jamie walked beside, his voice a steady murmur. You're doing great, Shadow. Just a little more. His connection with the dog a compass guiding them through the dusk. Ella clutched the burner phone, Mara's last words echoing in her mind. Elmwood, North Lot, 8 p.m. Look for a blue sedan. Night fell heavy, stars piercing the sky as they reached the reserve's edge, a sprawling park alive with the hum of evening walkers and distant traffic. The North Lot loomed ahead, a scattering of cars glinting under sodium lights, the blue sedan a beacon near a cluster of oaks. That's it, Ella whispered, her heart pounding as they approached, Shadow's breaths rasping in Nathan's arms. Caleb scanned the lot, his hand on the recorder, his voice tense. Stay sharp. Could be a trap. A figure stepped from the sedan, a woman mid-30s, her auburn hair pulled back, her eyes sharp with a lawyer's scrutiny. Ella, she called, her voice cautious but familiar. Mara! Ella rushed forward, relief flooding her as she embraced her cousin Jamie, clinging to her leg. You're here, thank God. Mara's gaze flicked to Shadow, then Caleb, her brow furrowing. This the package? Caleb nodded, handing her the recorder and notebook, his voice clipped. Everything I've got on Victor Slade, Thornwood security. It's not clean, but it's enough to start digging. Mara tucked the evidence into her bag, her tone brisk. I've got a friend in the U.S. Attorney's office, clean, out of Slade's reach. She'll move fast if this holds up. She glanced at Shadow, her expression softening. He's why, isn't he? Jamie piped up, his voice fierce. Shadow's a hero. The bad man hurt him, but we saved him. Mara knelt, meeting his eyes with a smile. Then we'll make sure the bad man pays, kiddo. Headlights flared across the lot. A black Escalade rolling in slow, deliberate, its tinted windows swallowing the light. Caleb's hand shot up, his voice a hiss. Reyes, they've tracked us. Nathan set Shadow down, the dog trembling but alert, his growl a warning as he pressed against Jamie. Get to the car, Caleb barked, shoving Mara toward the sedan as Nathan scooped Jamie up, Ella grabbing Shadow's collar. Gunshots cracked, tires squealing as park-goers screamed, the Escalade bearing down like a predator unleashed. Mara dove behind the wheel, Ella piling in with Jamie and Shadow, Nathan and Caleb slamming the back doors as bullets pinged off the chassis. Go! Nathan roared, Mara flooring it, the sedan lurching onto the road, weaving through traffic as the Escalade pursued, its horn a bellow of rage. Shadow snarled, his body shielding Jamie despite the jolts tearing at his wounds, his loyalty a fortress against the chaos. Hold on! Mara shouted, taking a sharp turn, the city's lights blurring past as she pushed the car to its limits. Caleb leaned out the window, returning fire with a pistol pulled from his belt, the sharp reports a desperate counterpoint to Reyes's barrage. They're too close, he yelled, a bullet shattering the rear glass raining over Shadow and Jamie. Ella shielded her son, her voice a sob. Faster, Mara! The sedan swerved onto a side street, the Escalade's bulk struggling to follow, its headlights fading as Mara's skill outpaced their pursuit. Minutes stretched into eternity, the city giving way to quieter roads, the Escalade's roar dwindling to silence. Mara slowed, her breath ragged as she glanced back. Lost them, for now. Nathan clutched Jamie, his heart pounding, while Ella tended Shadow, his blood staining her hands anew. He's hurt worse, she gasped, tears streaming as she pressed a cloth to his side. Caleb checked the dog, his voice grim. He needs a vet. Now. Mara nodded, her resolve firm. There's a clinic 10 minutes out. Friend of a friend. Discreet. Then I'm gone with this. She tapped her bag. To the feds. Nathan's hand found Ella's, their fingers intertwining, a silent vow in the chaos. Jamie's voice broke through, small but fierce. Shadow says he'll stay with us. He's not scared anymore. The German shepherd's eyes met his, a flicker of peace amidst the pain, his tail thumping once, a promise unbroken. The sedan rolled towards safety, the night a cloak around their fragile victory, but the shadows of Slade's wrath still lingered, a storm yet to break. In the back seat, a family held tight, their courage forged by a dog's heart, ready to face whatever came next. The sedan cut through the night, its engine a steady hum beneath the city's restless pulse, carrying the Grayson family toward a fragile glimmer of salvation. Mara gripped the wheel, her auburn hair whipping in the wind from the shattered rear window, her eyes fixed on the road as she navigated toward the discreet clinic she'd promised. In the back seat, Nathan held Jamie close, the boy's small frame trembling with exhaustion and unshakable resolve, his toy train clutched like a lifeline. Ella cradled Shadow across her lap, the German shepherd's massive body limp but warm, his blood seeping through her makeshift bandages, staining her hands as she whispered prayers into his fur. Caleb sat beside her, his pistol stowed, his steady hands pressing a cloth to Shadow's worst wound, his face etched with a handler's quiet anguish. He's fading, Ella said, her voice cracking as she felt Shadow's breaths weaken, each one a fragile thread tethering him to life. Jamie leaned over, his small hands stroking the dog's muzzle, his hazel eyes glistening with tears. You're strong, Shadow, he murmured, his voice a melody of love and desperation. You saved us. Don't go. Shadow's eyes fluttered, locking onto Jamie's with a trust that pierced the chaos, his tail giving a faint thump, a flicker of the spirit that had carried them through the storm. Almost there, Mara called, her tone sharp with focus as she swerved onto a quiet street, a low brick building emerging from the shadows, a vet clinic, its sign dim but welcoming. Pineview Animal Care. She pulled into the lot, tires crunching gravel, and killed the engine, her door flying open as she leapt out. "Stay here, I'll get them ready," she shouted, sprinting toward the entrance, her bag with Caleb's evidence slung over her shoulder. Nathan climbed out, lifting Shadow with a father's strength, the dog's weight a burden he bore with fierce determination, while Ella guided Jamie, their steps hurried across the lot. The clinic door swung open, a woman in scrubs, mid-40s, grey-streaked hair pulled back, ushering them inside with a brisk, "This way!" Mara followed, her voice urgent. "Dr. Ellis, it's the emergency I called about. No questions, please." Ellis nodded, her eyes flicking to Shadow's bloodied form, her professional calm masking a flicker of shock. Back room. Now. They hurried through a sterile hall, the scent of antiseptic sharp against the night's damp earthiness, into a small operating suite where Ellis snapped on gloves, her team, a young tech with wide eyes, already prepping tools. Nathan laid Shadow on the steel table, the dog's body slumping as his strength ebbed, his whine a soft plea that broke Ella's heart. "Save him," she begged, her hands trembling as she stepped back, pulling Jamie into her arms. Ellis worked fast, her voice steady as she assessed the damage. Multiple lacerations, blood loss, possible internal bleeding. "We'll stabilize him, but he's critical." The tech hooked up an IV, fluids dripping into Shadow's vein, while Ellis cleaned the wounds, her hands deft despite the urgency. Jamie pressed his face to Ella's chest, his voice muffled but fierce. "Shadow says he's fighting. He won't leave me." Caleb knelt beside him, his dark eyes soft with a rare vulnerability. "He's got you to fight for, kid. That's more than he's ever had." Nathan's hand found Ella's, their fingers intertwining, a silent vow as they watched the team work. Scissors snipping bandages, sutures threading flesh, a dance of skill against the spectre of loss. Minutes stretched into an agonizing blur, the room a cocoon of tension and hope. Ellis stepped back at last, peeling off her gloves, her face lined with cautious relief. "He's stable for now. Fluids and antibiotics are in, wounds are closed. He's a tough one, but he's not out of the woods. Needs rest, monitoring." Ella's sob broke free, her arms tightening around Jamie as Nathan exhaled, his steady calm buckling under the weight of their miracle. "Thank you," he rasped, his voice thick with gratitude. Jamie slipped free, climbing onto a stool beside the table, his small hand resting on Shadow's head, the dog's eyes fluttering open at his touch. "You did it, Shadow," he whispered, tears streaking his cheeks. "You stayed." Shadow's tongue flicked out, a weak lick against Jamie's fingers, his tail thumping once, a promise kept in the quiet. Caleb watched, his jaw tight with emotion, a handler's pride mingling with a dawning hope. "He's a survivor," he said, his voice low. "Always was." Mara lingered by the door, her bag clutched tight, her voice cutting through the relief. "I've got to go. Feds are waiting. This—" She tapped the evidence. "End Slade if it's as good as you say." Caleb nodded, his resolve hardening. "It's enough to start. Names, dates, deals. Get it to your contact, Mara. Don't stop." She met his gaze, her lawyer's fire blazing. "I won't. Stay safe. Lay low till I call." With a final nod to Ella, she slipped out, the sedan's engine roaring to life as she vanished into the night, a warrior carrying their fight to the light. Dr. Ellis cleared her throat, her tone gentle but firm. "He needs to stay here. Overnight, maybe longer. You're welcome to wait, but it's safer if you're not seen." Nathan hesitated, his protective instinct warring with logic, but Ella squeezed his hand, her voice steady. "She's right. We've got to trust her. Give Shadow time." Jamie's lip trembled, his small frame leaning towards Shadow. "I don't want to leave him." Ellis knelt, her eyes kind. "He'll be okay, little man. I'll watch him like he's my own. You can come back tomorrow." Caleb stepped forward, his voice low. She's got a point. Reyes could still be sniffing around. We hole up somewhere else tonight, come back at dawn. Nathan nodded, his decision settling. There's a motel off Route 12, cash only, no questions. We'll wait there. Ella gathered Jamie, his small hand clinging to hers as he whispered a final, I love you, Shadow. The dog's eyes following him with a peace that eased their parting. They slipped out a back exit, the night air cool against their flushed skin, the city's hum a distant comfort as they piled into a borrowed van Ellis offered. Safer than your shot-up car, she'd said with a wry smile. Nathan drove, the motel a blur of neon 10 miles out, its faded sign a promise of rest. They checked in under a false name, the room small but warm, a single bed and a cot, their refuge as exhaustion claimed them. Jamie curled on the cot, his toy train beside him, his soft murmurs of "Shadow's okay," fading into sleep. Ella nestled against Nathan, her voice a whisper. He's safe. For now. That's enough. Nathan kissed her forehead, his steady heart a drumbeat of hope. We're getting there, love. One step at a time. Miles away, Mara handed the recorder and notebook to a stern woman in a crisp suit, Assistant U.S. Attorney Lena Carter, her office a fortress of law in the city's heart. Victor Slade, Mara said, her voice unwavering. Thornwood security, abuse, kidnapping, attempted murder. It's all here. Carter's eyes narrowed, flipping through the notebook, her recorder whirring as it played Caleb's clipped voice detailing Slade's crimes. This is raw, she said, her tone measured. But it's a start, enough for a warrant, maybe more. Where's the dog? Mara's jaw set, her loyalty fierce. Safe. That's all you need to know. Carter nodded, her resolve matching Mara's. We'll move fast, quietly. Slade's got ears everywhere, but not in my office. Tell your people to stay low. Mara exhaled, a weight lifting as she stepped into the night, the burner phone buzzing with a text to Ella. Delivered. Hold tight. Back at the motel, Ella read it aloud, her voice trembling with fragile hope, Nathan's arm tightening around her as Caleb paced, his soldier's vigilance unbroken. In the clinic, Shadow slept under Ellis's watchful eye, his chest rising with steadier breaths, his wounds a testament to his fight, his bond with Jamie a light burning through the dark. The wheels of justice turned, slow but relentless, a storm brewing for Slade as the family clung to their sanctuary, their courage forged by a dog's heart, their love a shield against the shadows still lurking beyond. The motel room hummed with a fragile quiet, the dawn's first light seeping through threadbare curtains, painting golden streaks across the Grayson family's weary faces. Nathan lay awake, his arm draped over Ella, her steady breathing a comfort against the storm they'd weathered. Jamie slept on the cot, his small chest rising and falling, his toy train clutched tight, a silent sentinel of his dreams. Caleb stood by the window, his silhouette etched against the greying sky, his dark eyes scanning the parking lot, the burner phone silent in his hand. The night had stretched long, each creak of the building a test of their frayed nerves, but no shadows had crept closer, no gunfire, no pursuit. For now, the world held its breath. Ella stirred, her voice a soft murmur as she checked the phone. Mara's text. Delivered. It's in the Fed's hands now. Nathan sat up, his steady calm returning, a spark of hope igniting in his chest. Then we wait. For Shadow. For justice. Caleb turned, his jaw loosening with a rare ease. Slade's time's running out. Carter's sharp. She'll bury him if the evidence holds. Jamie's eyes fluttered open, his small voice breaking the hush. Shadow's awake. He says he's better. He wants us. Ella's heart skipped, her hand finding Nathan's, their shared awe at their son's gift, a thread weaving through their resolve. They packed their meager belongings, the van's engine rumbling to life as they returned to Pineview Animal Care, the city waking around them, cars humming, birds calling, a world oblivious to their fight. Dr. Ellis met them at the clinic's back door, her grey-streaked hair tousled, her smile weary but warm. He's a miracle, she said, leading them to the recovery room where Shadow lay on a padded bed, his bandages fresh, his black and tan fur gleaming under the soft light. His head lifted at their approach, his tail thumping a steady rhythm, his eyes locking onto Jamie with a joy that melted the room's edges. "Shadow!" Jamie cried, rushing to his side, his small arms wrapping around the dog's neck, tears streaking his cheeks as Shadow licked his face, a whine of relief escaping his throat. Ella knelt beside them, her hands trembling as she stroked Shadow's fur, her voice thick with gratitude. "You made it, sweet boy." Nathan joined her, his steady hand resting on the dog's flank, his throat tight. "Tough as nails," he rasped, his pride a quiet flame. Caleb lingered back, his soldier's guard softening, a handler's bond rekindled in the sight of Shadow's recovery. Ellis briefed them, her tone professional but warm. "He's stable, stitches holding, infections down. He'll need weeks to heal fully, but he's out of danger. You can take him home, just keep him quiet." Jamie's face lit up, his voice fierce. "Home with us, forever." Nathan nodded, his decision unspoken but firm, Ella's smile sealing their vow. "He's ours," she said, her eyes glistening. "Always will be." They loaded Shadow into the van, his weight lighter in their arms, his trust in them a balm against the scars he bore. The drive back to Willow Hollow was a quiet pilgrimage, the forest's embrace welcoming them as the cottage came into view, its sturdy walls a haven reclaimed. Nathan carried Shadow inside, settling him on a blanket by the hearth, the fire's crackle a song of renewal. Jamie curled beside him, his small hand never leaving the dog's fur, his whispers a litany of love. "You're safe now, Shadow. No more bad men." Days blurred into a tender rhythm, Ella tending Shadow's wounds, Nathan repairing the shattered front door, Caleb teaching Jamie to whistle for Shadow, the dog's ears perking at the sound despite his weakness. The burner phone buzzed at last, Mara's voice crackling through. "It's done. Carter raided Thornwood. Slade's in custody. Evidence was gold. Reyes too. You're clear." Caleb exhaled, his shoulders sagging with a relief he hadn't dared feel. "It's over," he said, his voice soft with wonder. Nathan clapped his shoulder, a brother's bond forged in their fight. "You're part of this, Caleb. Stay as long as you want." Weeks turned to months, the Hollow healing with the family. Shadow grew stronger, his limp fading, his coat shining as he bounded through the yard with Jamie, their laughter a melody against the rustling leaves. The rail line stood silent now, its menace a memory, the storm that had birthed their bond a distant echo. Caleb stayed, his cabin a retreat but the cottage his anchor, his skills shaping a new life, training dogs for rescue, not ruin, Shadow his first pupil. One crisp autumn day, the air golden and sharp, they gathered on the porch, Nathan with a mug of coffee, Ella with her novel, Caleb whittling a stick, Jamie and Shadow sprawled in the grass, the boys' giggles rising as the dog chased a ball with a puppy's zeal. A car rolled up the drive, Mara stepping out, her suit traded for jeans, her smile bright. "Thought I'd check in," she said, joining them, her bag lighter without the weight of evidence. "Slade's trial's set. Life if Carter's right. You did it." "We all did," Ella said, her hand finding Nathan's, their shared glance a testament to their strength. Jamie ran up, Shadow at his heels, his voice bubbling with pride. "Shadow's a hero, Aunt Mara. He saved us, and we saved him." Mara knelt, ruffling his hair, her eyes soft as she met Shadow's gaze. "He sure is, kiddo. You're a team." Shadow woofed, his tail wagging, his bond with Jamie a light that never dimmed. That night, the family sat by the hearth, the fire's glow wrapping them in warmth. Shadow stretched across their feet, his snores a gentle rumble. Jamie leaned against him, his toy train rolling in his hand, his voice a whisper. Shadow says he's happy, really happy. Ella's tears fell silently, her heart full as she pulled her son close, Nathan's arm encircling them both. Caleb watched, his guarded heart open at last, a quiet peace settling over him. Beyond the hollow, the world turned. Slade's empire crumbled, Thornwood's secrets aired in court, justice a slow but certain tide. But within the cottage time stood still, a sanctuary forged by courage and love. Shadow's scars remained, a map of his fight, but his eyes shone with a joy Slade could never steal, his soul entwined with Jamie's in a bond beyond words. Years later, the story lingered in Willow Hollow, a tale whispered among the trees of a boy who heard a dog's cry through a storm, of a family who defied darkness, of a German shepherd who chose mercy and found a home. The rail line rusted, the cottage thrived, and Shadow grew old beside Jamie, his greying muzzle resting on the boy's lap, his tail thumping to the end. On quiet nights, Jamie, now taller, his hazel eyes wiser, would sit by the hearth, Shadow at his side, and smile. "You called me, didn't you?" he'd say, and Shadow's soft woof would answer, a promise unbroken, a love eternal. The hollow held them close, its shadows softened by their light, a legacy of bravery and heart etched into its earth. And as the stars wheeled above, the Grayson family lived on, bound by a dog's courage, a child's faith, and a love that conquered all, a home forever theirs, in the tender embrace of Willow Hollow.